All right, well, today I'm going to review a movie, and that movie is Street Survivors, the true story of Lynyrd Skynyrd. This movie is Artemis Powell's account of his time with the Lynyrd Skynyrd Band. Now, Artemis Powell was not the original drummer for Skynyrd, that was Bob Burns. But Artemis joined up with the band in 1975, and he played on the albums Nothing Fancy, Give Me Back My Bullets, One More from the Road, and Street Survivors. And he was in the plane crash that took the lives of Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, Dean Kilpatrick. Us Skynyrd fans, when we're referring to Artemis, we usually call him an original member just because he was from that original phase, pre-plane crash. This movie is his account with the band. Now, I just want to say a couple of things before I get too deep in the weeds reviewing this movie. First of all, I do want to say that, I know Artemis Powell has had a beef with Gary Rossington and with Judy Van Zant, Ronnie Van Zant's widow. I know there was trouble between them, Gary and Judy suing Artemis and not wanting this movie made because they didn't want him to tell his side of the story, I guess they wanted to make their own movie about Skynyrd. I just want to say that I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm a fan of Lynyrd Skynyrd. I'm a fan of Artemis Powell. I'm a fan of Gary Rossington. So I don't have a dog in the fight. I think it's stupid for a guy like me who wasn't even born yet to be sitting here going, oh man, he's right or he's wrong. I wasn't there, but I'm just reviewing a movie. Now, I have been a Skynyrd fan since I was a teenager, and I have absolutely was obsessed with them. I still am. I have read and studied every possible thing there is to read and study, listened to countless interviews. If there's a YouTube video on YouTube that says Lynyrd Skynyrd by it, I've probably watched it. It's very rare when I come across footage I haven't seen of the original band anyway. But I'm definitely a fan, and I definitely know the story very well. So getting into reviewing the movie, I'll start right there. I am a person who knows the Skynyrd story front to back, inside and out. And I had a hard time following this movie. Because no one is ever properly introduced. There's no backstory. There's no nothing. There's an opening credits, starts off. It's pretty cool. That little package at the beginning. Then it flashes to Artemis Powell, the real Artemis Powell, sitting in a chair and talking about joining the band. And then it goes into the movie part of it. And it shows him sitting around the table. And he gets a call. His wife answers the phone, and it's Ronnie Van Zant wanting to talk to Artemis about joining the band. And then it shows Artemis go to Atlanta. He plays some drums with another band. Ronnie hires him. And then it jumps from right there to 2 days before the crash on October 18th of 77. So there's no backstory whatsoever for Artemis Powell. You don't necessarily know who he is or why he's there or who this band is. It's just very poorly put together at the start to where it just jumps really hard. I would like to point something out. I'm not a big Motley Crue fan. I just know a couple of their songs, and I like a couple of them. So I'm kind of a casual listener of Motley Crue. But when I watched that movie, Dirt, or whatever it was called on Netflix, I can say that from someone who was just a casual listener, I at least kind of understood the story and could follow it. And I was introduced to the characters properly to where I knew who was who. In this case, knowing the story as good as I do, I was still confused. So I can't imagine if you was a casual listener, what it would be like. Now, there's one part in this movie that jumped out at me bad, and I got to address this. Gary Rossington is one of my all-time favorite guitar players, and whoever's playing Gary in this movie acts like an absolute douchebag. They show a scene where they're playing Call Me the Breeze, and the reason they played that song, that's the only song you see the band play. Artemis couldn't get permission to use Skynyrd's music, so they had to do Call Me the Breeze, which was written by J.J. Cale. And in that scene, Gary Rossington is dancing around, and he's mouthing the words with Ronnie, and he's acting like an idiot. And then it shows him go backstage, and it shows him acting real goofy, and it shows Ronnie say, hey, Gary, shut up, man. And then he walks over to Artemis and tells him what a good job he's doing. And I know there's a beef there between Artemis and Gary, and it just kind of felt like that Artemis might have been taking a stab at Gary during this one. But then, it just, like I said, the movie jumps all over the place. I made some notes here. It just shows, like I said, it's all over the place. You're 2 days before the crash, and then it shows them partying a lot, and they just look like a bunch of guys, man. Like it looks like a bunch of guys decided to go to a Halloween party and dress up like Lynyrd Skynyrd. Now, I did write down that a guy named Taylor Clift played Ronnie Van Zant. Yeah, he's kind of mediocre, I would really like to see a movie made about Ronnie Van Zant, and I would like to see Clayne Crawford play Ronnie Van Zant. And if you don't know who Clayne Crawford is, Google it. I think he's the man for the job. The guy that played Artemis was Ian Schultes. I guess I'm saying that right. He was probably the best actor of the bunch, the guy playing Artemis. But, finally it gets to the plane crash scene. And, I will say that, Lynyrd Skynyrd's music has touched my life so deeply that even in this generic movie, I still felt something when I watched that scene. It shows Ronnie asleep, and then he gets up, gets a bottle of Jack Daniels and takes a swig, and he goes over and, shakes hands with Artemis. Now, I said at the start of this video that I've never met any of the band members in Skynyrd, but I did get to meet Gene Odom, who was on that plane and was Ronnie Van Zant's bodyguard, and I got to talk with him some about it. And he's not mentioned anywhere in this movie, so I don't know if there's a beef there. But that's my biggest problem with this movie is this: no one is ever properly introduced. You don't necessarily know who Cassie Gaines is until someone says, "Hey, Cassie." I don't know if they ever said, "Hey, Steve," but they show a guy holding a guitar pick that looks just like Steve Gaines. But the plane goes down. That's probably the most dramatic scene in the movie. And then it shows Artemis trying to crawl through the wreckage. It shows him, at one point, it shows him find Leon and Billy. And Billy's telling him that Leon's knocked out to go get help. It shows him it shows him try to pick up a wing off of Gary at one point. Then it shows him find Alan and then Cassie and then Ronnie, and then he goes for help. And boy, I tell you, they milked this scene where he runs for help. I've not seen Rambo do this much heroic shit. And I'm not denying Artemis Pyle here. I'm not going to, because I believe with all my heart that Artemis Pyle truly did run for help. I know there's been a beef there, and Gary Roston said I believe he was just running scared, but I'm not going to sit here. We're talking about people that survived a traumatic plane crash, okay? So, as far as who remembers what correctly, I couldn't have a beef with any of these guys, man, because that was a very traumatic thing they went through, and I can't imagine being in it. So, I've got the details wrong. Hell, all I've ever done, I've done a 360 in my truck one time on some ice, and me and my buddy both have different accounts of that. So I can't imagine if I was in a plane crash that took this many lives of people I cared about. So, there's that. But it goes on. It shows him, he runs through, and there's one funny scene when he's crossing the swamp. He comes upon the snake blocking his trail, and he's like, "I'll bite your fucking head off." That time I actually laughed out loud. Then he climbs over a barbed wire fence, and he climbs over this guy's gate, and this guy walks out and shoots him with a gun in the shoulder. Now, I've heard that story told two different ways. I've actually heard Artemis tell it two different ways. I've heard him say that the guy fired over his head like a warning shot, and then I've heard him say that the guy shot him. In this scenario, the guy really shoots him. And then they go into the guy's house. Artemis calls his wife first. Smart man. He calls his wife first, and then he calls for help. And then they go back to the side of the crash, and Artemis is trying to tell them where the plane's at, but they said to Artemis, "Hey, man, you're really wounded. Let us get you to the hospital." So they take Artemis to the hospital. They start working on him. Then it shows him wake up. The doctor tells him who and all passed away. Then he gets out of the hospital and he goes to visit the other members in the hospital. It shows him visit Leon. And at one point it shows him going in, I guess it's Leslie, because again, they're not very properly introduced. Goes in and he talks to Leslie, and this woman who looks like JoJo Billingsley walks in and just puts her arm around him. Now, JoJo Billingsley was one of the honkettes that wasn't actually on the plane. Whoever this character was dressed just like her, so I'm assuming it was, but again, we didn't get no explanation. Then it showed, I'm looking at my notes here. Then he goes, after he gets out of the hospital, after he visits him in the hospital, he goes back to the plane crash site, and there's people there, and he almost gets in a fight with the guy who insults Skynyrd. And then they take him in this tent, the police do, and they show him, like, "You got narcotics." And he grabs it. He goes, "Are you kidding me? This is ginseng." And then he goes back to the hospital, and they tell him, "Hey, you got to pay your bill." And then it shows him get on the phone and call up the manager, Peter Rudge. And the only reason I know that's because he just said, "Hey, Peter." And he tells him, says, "Hey, man," says, "Whatever deal you made was with Ronnie. I can't help you." And then it shows him walk out of the hospital. It shows the actor playing drums, and then it morphs into the real guy, Artemis, playing drums, and then you're out. And that's the whole movie. Now, there's one thing I will say here. At the end, Artemis is talking about playing drums for Skynyrd, and he says, no Skynyrd song had the same drum track. I played a different part on every track. And I will say amen to that. Artemis Pyle is one hell of a drummer who played very iconic and tasteful parts on every song. No two songs were alike. So as far as drumming for Lynyrd Skynyrd, man, my hand is always off to Artemis Pyle. He is a badass drummer, and I love it. But this movie I think would have been better served. Okay, of course we would all love to see a big Ronnie Van Zant biopic, but if you're going to do an Artemis Pyle movie, fine. I just felt like it needed more of a backstory to Artemis. It needed more explanation as to who these people are. There just was no real storytelling. I think they would have been better off to have let Artemis narrate the entire thing, and then maybe, like that show, I don't know if you saw the show Dark Side of the Ring on the Vice channel, where the wrestlers sit around and talk about shit, and then they have these reenactments of like actors in the shadow. I think that might have been a better thing for this movie, would have just been to put those actors in the shadow and let Artemis tell his side of the story. Because like I said, it jumped around. If you're a diehard Skynyrd fan, you're going to have to watch this. You're going to have to go ahead and get it over with. You're going to have to watch it. And if you're a casual listener, you better find a diehard fan to help walk you through it. Because you wouldn't know. If you didn't know the story, you would not be able to follow it. So, I don't know how I'm going to rate these movies. 2 thumbs up. I guess I'd probably give it 1 thumb in the middle and 1 thumb down. I can't totally shit on it because I'm a fan of Artemis Pyle, but if you're a Skynyrd fan, go check it out and tell me if I'm wrong. And maybe I'll do another movie review. I just thought I'd try my hand at this one because this is a movie that I've had a lot of friends asking me, "What you think of that?" Well, there's what I thought of it. And if you have any suggestions as to what kind of music biopic I should watch and review next, just drop it in the comments. But thanks for listening, and go check out this movie.